Hello and welcome to this video. I'm going to talk to you about what are the things you need to consider when you're doing training with teachers, or even before that when you start to design teacher training. So the basic components of an effective workshop and the elements of this video tutorial is basically a set of basic guidelines you can follow. I have divided them in 6 categories: understanding your audience, presenting the structure of your presentation, how to design interactive activities, how to engage in conversation, what your overall behavior as a teacher trainer needs to be like, and how to manage your time. So starting from understanding your audience, one of the things that you've probably been told in the past is that we as humans usually um, have 3 zones. In some cases, we might even divide it into more than 3. But basically, as people, we have three zones. One is the comfort zone, the other one is the learning zone, and the third one is the panic zone. So what you really want to do with your teachers is to deliver to them a workshop that will get them out of their comfort zone, but not too far away so that they reach their panic zone. You need to keep them in the learning zone. So why uh, do I need to get them out of the comfort zone? Because keeping them in the comfort zone basically means they're not really learning something new. They are not really learning something that challenges them. Or that they are engaging in activities that they have done before and they feel comfortable with, but again, they're not adding anything new. That also means that the goals they have been asked to achieve are very easy, or that they're not even goals at all. So that basically is what passive or inexperienced trainers usually do. They stick to the basics. They only deliver superficial information. Their activities are not that innovative, and they don't really have clear goals for their training workshop. If I overdo it and I go to the panic zone, that means that I'm probably giving my trainees too much information, more than they can handle, or that I am asking them to complete very complicated tasks that kind of gets them to feel confused and frustrated. I might design a workshop that is too ambitious, and I haven't really taken into consideration the abilities of my audience, so over ambitious expectations. Or during the training, as a teacher training, I am a little bit pushy. I tend to push my trainees more than I should. Teacher training requires a lot of patience. So if I avoid these 2 extremes, I am in the learning zone. That means that I focus on the key information. I'm not overdoing it, but I'm not also giving too few information. I have got some tasks that I'm sure that they can handle, and they provide the necessary guidance. I am making sure that I have goals that they are one step at a time oriented. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that later on. And um, as a presence, as a behavior, the teacher training trainer needs to be someone who encourages the trainees, someone who believes in them and set an example for them. We shouldn't be too pushy or too passive. So, as you probably already know, when you're entering a teacher training workshop, you have a lot of different types of teachers you are going to be talking to. It's just like what the teachers have to deal with in a student's class. You have all kinds of different characters, all kinds of different profiles. Usually there is some teacher who is only interested in whatever has to do with technology and doesn't really like, for example, hands-on activities. There are some that might have to be there, but they don't really want to, and they're completely indifferent. They're not really interested, or they tend to block out because they believe that because it's not completely based on their discipline, the workshop has nothing to do with them. There are people that might be shy, but they pay a lot of attention and they could do a lot of things. There are people who might act as, a know-it-all guy, or a girl, someone who believes that knows it all. Some people tend to be leaders, some tend to be quiet but perceptive. So there are all different kinds of people that you will meet in a teacher training, and you need to basically consider the needs of everyone and be able to handle all these different types of profiles. So how do you handle a diverse group of participants? This is going to be explained throughout the rest of the presentation, and I'm going to give you tips here and there about how to handle them based on how you talk to your audience, how you manage your time, what kind of tasks you give them, and so on. So based on that, starting from the presentation structure, it's a good idea to divide your presentation to sections and have a clear structure. That will help everybody have a clear idea of what they are going to talk about, what they're going to learn, and have a clear overview of the goals of the presentation. It's a good idea to present all the sections up front, so there's a structure that everybody knows about, and it's going to be useful to you because later on in the presentation or in your workshop you can make references to the sections that have preceded every now and then. It's a good idea to use presentations that are not overloaded with text. People tend to be overwhelmed when they see a lot of text. They don't really read it. It can be tiring to the eye. And to make it easier, try to use styling. So like I have in this slide, I'm using a different color to highlight the keywords. That will also help you as a presenter to quickly remember what each slide is about and have a more fluent presentation. And since we don't want to overload with text, what we want to do is to have pictures and diagrams and representations of different kinds. This is also going to help different types of learners to engage. You want to keep it light and fun. You don't want to be, this super serious and very, very one-dimensional trainer. What you want to do is to basically try and connect with the people. Maybe some personal references, some personal stories, a little bit of discussion here, then maybe a joke when it's fit. All these could help you keep the mood up and have a light and very positive mood in your audience. Try not to have too many slides in every presentation. Less is more. Having a long presentation doesn't necessarily make it good. And if you have a lot to talk about and you need to cover a lot in a single training event, make sure you break down that big chunk into smaller ones. So you have smaller parts which you can combine to make the bigger one. And try not to have training workshops during which you talk all the time or for a long period of time. Try to break down all that you have to say into little pieces and add a little bit of interactivity in between the long talking parts. So try to have small interactive activities which you can add in key points of your workshop. Make sure you have a lot of discussion. Again, it's a very, very good idea to give this feeling to your participants that this is more of a conversation rather than a lecture, because even teachers don't like lectures. It's not just the students. So try to lighten the mood and to make it more engaging by turning your lecture into a discussion. Try to give the floor to participants as much as possible. Um, um, when you're talking to your audience and when you're asking questions, it's a good idea to start with those that seem to be more eager to exchange ideas and to communicate. The shy ones will not engage as much, but if conversation goes on and on and on, and there's interactivity, and the trainees see how you respond to them, even the shy ones will feel more eager to participate and to share what they have in mind. Consider giving some materials to your participants prior to the workshop as preparation. That will help you gain some time. Maybe some parts of the lecture, some introductions could be delivered to the participants before the workshop. Making videos for them is a really good idea. That way you're saving time for your workshop, so you can do more interactive stuff, and you avoid boring your audience with long lectures. So whatever is minor and whatever is procedural, I would say, you could also share with them before the workshop. When you want your audience to really engage in discussion with you, this is particularly difficult when you're delivering online presentations and online workshops. During them, people tend to be a lot more passive than in face-to-face workshops. It's good to set a positive, receptive spirit from the start. You need to try and present the need and the added value of what you're about to discuss, and encourage them to give their insight. The best way to do that, of course, is to think of clever questions, I would say. Try to think what are the questions that they really want to answer when we want to present a certain pedagogy, for example. I'm sure you can think of a couple of questions that really speak to the heart of the teacher and will get them engaged. So, because we want to have a discussion, even before starting the workshop and before starting the introduction, it's a good idea to take the temperature of the audience by starting with some questions, which will initiate a conversation, which will lead to basically the beginning of the lecture. It's nice to make links with your audience based on experiences. Every now and then, when possible, it's a good idea to refer to examples or some personal experience of yours, or ask them to share their own experiences so they can better relate to what you're discussing. And last but not least, do not be afraid to go off script. It is very often the case that you have a very well designed workshop and very specific things you want to say, but sometimes discussion and conversation can take you elsewhere. This is not necessarily bad. Sometimes when you're not afraid to go off script, you might discover very, very interesting things, and you might be able to get a lot more out of a workshop than you originally designed. So try to keep on script, but don't be afraid to go off script, because you might get a lot of added value to what you're discussing. So moving on to interactive discussions, as I said earlier, it's a good idea to break long lecture parts with interactive activities. Why do we want them? Because interactive activities keep the interest of the audience. It helps them to bond because they're activities that they do collaboratively, and most importantly, because we want to use them to deepen the understanding of the subject at hand. Experience always gives us a lot more and a much deeper understanding to what we're doing. How to design them? Try to keep them simple and short. Don't overdo it because it's going to get tiring for them and they might disengage. Definitely promote collaboration and open discussion. Don't try to get people to do stuff on their own. Better get them to collaborate. And depending on what you're doing, what kind of activities you want, you might want to explore universal, as I call them, subjects, which are easier when addressing a diverse audience. What I mean is that if you have, for example, a workshop that is going to be attended by science teachers, but of all the not all of them are of the same discipline. So physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, earth sciences. The activities you're going to decide to design need to be a little bit universal. They need to be on subjects that everybody can relate to. If it's a physics, for example, activity, the chemist or the biologist might not be interested. So try to keep to universal subjects. So getting inspiration from everyday life, from contemporary science achievements, and stuff like that. Uh, Designing activities can be a lot of fun. Here I have some examples for you, which might inspire your creativity. It's fun to work with simple tools. It's much easier to design them, and it's much easier for the teachers to replicate them then at their schools. Some of the activities we have been using over the years and have been quite successful are the mystery boxes to explain how inquiry works, or the Tangram challenge that is designed to explain how interdisciplinary works. We have designed activities that are based on the bingo game, or we have asked participants to do comic books, or to replicate, to simulate a phenomenon using simple tools like plastiline and aluminum pans and water and sand and things like that. So interactive activities can be a lot of fun. They can be designed to communicate any kind of theme, and the sky is the limit, really. You can design whatever you want. My proposal is to try and keep it simple, in the sense that try not to use materials that are difficult to find, because at the end of the day, you want the teachers to take these activities in their class as well. And inspiration really comes from everywhere. You can get inspired from board games or any other kind of game. You can have you can be inspired by games and extend their current rationale. You might want to rethink uh, how to replicate an experimental procedure. It's a good idea to use simplified equivalents and representations. The mystery boxes activity and the Tangram challenge activity are basically designed following this strategy. Um, Personal experiences and memories, especially childhood memories, could also be a good inspiration to design simple activities. And learning approaches can also be used to design activities like that. Basically, inspiration is everywhere. And I have come up with designs for workshops from board games, from movies, from things I see on the street. If you keep your eyes open, you will soon realize that you can find inspiration uh, literally everywhere. Setting up interactive activities. Um, as a wrap up, make sure they're fun to do, they're not difficult, complicated, or something boring. Try to use as simple tools as possible. Um, for complicated artifacts, things that you cannot easily find, you can use representations. Try to minimize consumables so it's easy to replicate. And just like when we're designing an activity for students, try and consider the degrees of freedom you want, depending on what you intend your trainees to do. And make sure you give them ample time to do whatever task you assign them, because it's not just about being in a hurry and do the task, it's also about taking the time to discuss, to have fun, and to feel relaxed. Moving on to conversation, we talked a little bit about that earlier as well. You want to try and encourage your trainees to discuss with you, to share their ideas, and set a positive attitude. Make sure you're careful on when it comes to reacting to wrong or insufficient answers. You don't really want to try and challenge them, in the sense that the way you respond to them needs to be subtle, so that they do not feel offended or disappointed or humiliated in front of the rest of the audience. So make sure you don't discourage your participants. Always be honest, even if they ask a very difficult question to which you don't know the answer, or the answer you have for them is not what you would want it to be. Honesty is always appreciated. Even an unsuitable answer can be food for a fruitful discussion. So if you find yourself facing a difficult question to answer, try to bring in the audience again and get them to work with you to break that question down to a deeper level where it's easier to handle. Again, don't be afraid to go off script. A fruitful discussion is best to keep it going, even if you go off schedule. Of course, not too much, but still. But if it goes way off topic or off schedule, make sure to stop it politely. So speaking of the behavior of the trainer, well, I cannot stress this enough. One does not simply pay attention to a boring teacher, and that applies from students to teachers, as well as from teachers to teacher trainers. If you're doing a boring lecture, you're going to lose your audience no matter what. Teacher trainers, just like teachers in their own classes, they're basically are advertisers. When you're doing a workshop, you're basically selling a product, and you need to be effective in selling that product. You have to be effective. You have to make sure that you keep the interest of your audience. So try and do what you preach. Be the change you want to communicate. Try to engage your teachers by putting in action on during the workshop of exactly what you're preaching, exactly what you're trying to communicate for them. To give you an example here, let's say that we want to introduce inquiry learning to teachers. If you go on and just do a lecture on inquiry learning, it's basically like you're preaching one thing and you're doing another. In fact, you're doing exactly the opposite. You're trying to convince a teacher to move from lecture-based teaching to student-centered inquiry teaching, while you're teaching them in the way you don't want them to teach. So make sure you do what you preach. If I want to teach inquiry, I have to do it in an inquiry way. I have to get them engaged. I have to set a problem. I have to get them to do some kind of experiment and discuss with them the pedagogy at hand. The mystery boxes workshop is designed exactly like that. It's about introducing inquiry, using inquiry. So try to set a positive mood. Your vibe is what is going to do that. So you need to be up tempo. You need to be smiling and have a good mood on your own in order to get your participants in the same mood. And people will definitely read insecurity or confidence on you. So you need to make sure you're entering the room in a confident way and you speak confidently. Your approach and mindset is also very, very important. There are teacher trainings who have this know-it-all attitude. They enter the workshop in a way that says to the teacher that I know what is best, I know better than you, and you have to listen to me. Teachers will not react well to that. They might feel like there is no resonance with the trainer. On the other hand, we have the down-to-earth tutor who basically, through the way that he or she is presenting the subject at hand, is like telling your teachers, we know you are the experts of your own class. You know what is going on in your class better than anyone. At the end of the day, you're going to decide if what I tell you is going to help you in your work, and if you will decide to take a piece of that and change your teaching style. So be a little bit careful with your approach and your mindset. People don't like arrogant tutors, so try to connect with them. And I suppose it goes without saying, but it's better that you truly believe in what you're preaching. If you want to do a workshop while designing, make sure you really believe in what you're saying, and all that you say is something that you would do yourself. When it comes to body language and eye contact, we've seen tutors sitting on a desk, reading slide by slide and not engaging with their audience at all. But we've also seen tutors that are basically one man or one woman show. It's like you're going to a show. We don't want to make show men or show women out of you, but we definitely don't want to have boring tutors. So body language, active tutoring is the key here. Try to have direct contact with all your participants, eye contact, looking at them. Make sure you express yourself not just through your mouth, but with your entire body, facial expressions, gestures, going around the room, mixing with the audience, going back and forth, will set a better mood for the workshop. Another thing that I have found very interesting, I already told you this a couple of times, is that I always get a positive reaction from my audience when I share personal stories with them. So sharing your own experience with them gets you to resonate with them. It is easier to communicate and get a bond with your audience. Give your audience the opportunity to share their own experience and highlights from other events, and always make sure you stick to your take-home message. At the end of the day, when they go home, if there is one thing you really want them to remember from your workshop, what is that? What is the take-home message? Going back to inquiry, for example, a take-home message would be, this is a student-centered approach. The student is at the very heart of the learning process, and students need to have degrees of freedom and make decisions. So once you decide what is the take-home message of your workshop, you need to make sure that you keep communicating that message again and again and again throughout your workshop in different ways. I don't mean to repeat the same two sentences again and again. I'm talking about making a reference to that throughout your presentation as you move from one part to the other. Like I said before, we've seen people just reading off slides. This is definitely a red flag. No reading slides, please. A presentation is basically a performance, so you need to be able to feel how you to do your lecture or your workshop, even if there were no slides there at all. Try to communicate the key elements, and it's not necessarily to even say the whole story. That's why you have your presentation, and you make it available to your trainees afterwards. Again, try to be prepared to go off script. We've talked about how important it is to feel comfortable to go off script, but you need to be prepared for that. That means that you give your participants room to share their needs, and you also allow time for discussion, and try to prepare to adapt to these needs and shift the focus of your workshop. This is not something that is done easily. It takes a lot of experience to do it. The more you repeat a workshop, the better understanding you will have of the needs of the participants and what are the options of shifting the focus and how you can adapt to the needs of different participants. So being prepared to go off script is not something that you can do necessarily automatically. It's something that takes time and experience, and every time you do a certain workshop, you will learn a little bit more about that, and you will be able to think of ways to enrich it and to adapt if you need to. Sometimes in some workshops, discussions can get so interesting and so fruitful, and they can give your audience so much more food for thought that it could be potentially better to continue the discussion rather than even finishing the presentation. And of course, I'm not talking about the discussion that goes off topic. I'm talking about a discussion on the matter. Sometimes it might even be worth not finishing the entire presentation if you see that the discussion is going to get you to your objective through a different route. That is, of course, connected to what we talked about before about going off script. So make sure that you treat your audience as equals. Like we said before, we don't really want cardinal tutors, I would say, the know-it-all kind of tutor. Make sure that you acknowledge that the teachers are the ones that know their class best, and you're there to support them and to help them enrich their teaching style, and you're not there to just tell them what to do. Keep your presentations diverse. Try to engage as many different types of profiles as possible. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that the audience is really part of the presentation. That happens basically through discussion. And you need to do that since the beginning. Like we said earlier, you might want to take the temperature of the room, for example, by starting the workshop with some questions. Always make sure you give them time to share their opinion, welcome the concerns that they have, welcome the comments they have, and really pay attention to them, and try to give the floor to as many people as possible. Last but not least, type management, which is also always a tricky part, especially when we are new to doing teacher training. Make sure you have a balanced distribution of time between lecture and hands-on activities and discussion. Like we said before, long lecture chunks could be really tiring for your audience, so make sure you break them off with some hands-on activities while also ensuring there is plenty of time for discussion. Sometimes, especially when discussions go on and you don't really want to interrupt them, or for some reasons the workshop might start late or whatever, be prepared up front to skip certain parts of your presentation. In case there is a time restriction you had not foreseen, make sure you know what is not a priority and which parts of your presentation you can skip. Depending on the content of the slide, each slide should usually take around 1 or 2 minutes. So if you have 10 slides, for example, I would say that is about 15 to 20 minutes of presentation. And always, when you're setting the schedule, always reserve 10 minutes extra for whatever unexpected delays you may have. That involves people coming in late, Wi-Fi interruption, longer discussions, or whatever else. So that's all I had to talk to you about. Good luck designing your teacher training events, and I hope you're going to try and do the best that you can.